So thank you so much, Shauna. Now for our next speaker. Stephen Hecht became CEO of his family's company at 30 years old. And through this experience, he found out that our current ways of dealing with conflict prioritize winning negotiations rather than building lasting relationships. So he set out to build his own approach. He co-founded Million Peacemakers and now reaches millions through his own method called Nonflict. So let's join Stephen to not only learn how to overcome conflict, but learn through it.
Imagined that how you handle conflict can shape your entire life, whether it brings people closer to you or it pushes them away, whether it fills you with peace or leaves you in pain. My way for much of my life of dealing with conflict was negotiating to win. I became a student of negotiation. The Art of War was my favorite book. But I found that I was winning battles and losing relationships. 2 failed marriages, family tensions, strikes at work. I soon realized if I did not redesign the way I dealt with conflict, I'd be left alone. With a long list of wins, but not much else. I'd like to share with you today my journey from conflict maker to peacemaker, and together how we could redesign the blueprint on how we deal with conflict. Life got real serious for me when I was 20, and my uncle, who was the CEO of our family business, died suddenly, putting me in a leadership role much before I or my other family members were prepared. That caused conflict. 10 years later, when I was the CEO of the company, I joined a group of global CEOs so I would not feel as alone in my journey. In 2012, I was responsible for education for our Canadian region. And I said, let me do an event, a workshop that I could learn from and grow from. And in talking to my peers, they felt the same need. So I said, great, let me get an expert in conflict resolution. I'm an expert in having conflict. I bought a dozen books on the topic, and I found they were typically by PhDs for other PhDs. Brilliant, but not practical for our needs. I was introduced by a friend to a resource who worked with our members in conflict zones, Dr. Amir Kafir, Indian and Pakistanis, Greeks and Turks, Israelis and Arabs. And he agreed to facilitate the event. And we put together a team of academics and practitioners to come up with a model that could be so simple, it fits on the back of a business card or a picture on your phone, and so powerful it could work for any conflict, from an internal conflict to an identity-based conflict, which are the toughest ones. And we took that model based on existing research out there, and we called it Nonflict. There was no word for resolved conflict. My stepson came up with that, so thank you, Greg, for that. We tested it with 700 of our members and our spouses and young adults. And we found through our exit surveys that 85% of the conflicts were resolved without the other person even being there, just by going through the process and putting ourselves in their shoes. So that was amazing. So then I said, let me take it to a tougher audience. And for me, the most difficult and emotional conflict out there is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is still, unfortunately, very much out there in a negative way. And I went with my family, my wife and stepson, through an introduction by another friend, to the other side of the wall to meet with activist women in a women's co-op. Now, I'm a Canadian Jew. For me, this is very much out of my comfort zone. But I know we only grow when we're out of our comfort zone. So the first question to me by the founder was, you're from Canada. Your government did not accept us as it stayed in the UN. What did the Palestinians do against Canadians? I thought for a minute. I said, you're right. In conflict, from everyone's perspective, they are right. And if they see you're not there to make them wrong, it diffuses tension. So then I said, I'm not a politician, I'm a business person that travels around the world, and all that I and the people I meet know about you is what we hear about in the media. Would you be willing to share your true stories that I could then share when I travel? So she said, okay. We went around the table, and I took them through the questions of Nonflict. The first question is, understand, or the first step is to understand yourself and your partner, the person you're in conflict with. So I asked them to share their facts and feelings around the conflict and what was important to them. And then I would actively and generously listen to them and repeat back in my own words a summary of what I heard and ask, did I understand you well? And is there anything else? There's always something else. I continued to listen and repeat back until there was nothing else. Then we moved to step 2. Actually, before that, I asked them, now put yourself in the shoes of an Israeli mother or woman, and how do you think they would answer these questions? And you saw something clicked, because for what was important to them was to feel safe, to feel respected, to have hope for the future, and they realized that the other side probably wants the same thing. And feeling disrespected, by the way, is the source of almost every conflict. Think of your own conflicts. Step 2 of Nonflict is to understand our shared reality. Now we discuss together what is the real underlying conflict versus the symptoms of the conflict. In this case, the underlying conflict is we don't know the other. There's a big wall between us. We dehumanize the other on both sides. Next question is, what, if anything, is working well for us? Then, what is our worst case scenario and how would it feel if we did not resolve this conflict? Then we went to step 3, which is to co-create. We said, what is our ideal reality, our best case scenario, and how would that feel? If peace is our ideal reality, what would that look like? Then what are the obstacles to achieve our ideal reality? And of the obstacles we can control or influence, what could we do to overcome them? Followed by an action plan. At that moment, the founder came and hugged my wife and looked at me in the eye and said to me, thank you for being a friend to the Palestinians. We like what we learned, and we're going to use it with our husbands. But more importantly, we are prepared to meet 15 Jewish Israeli mothers, and if you could get Obama, Netanyahu, and a bus in a room, we mothers won't let them out until there is a deal. That's when I realized I had in my hand a gift to the world I needed to share. If they were willing to be taking the risk of being accused of collaboration with the enemy for the sake of freedom and peace, the least I could do is everything in my power to spread this tool that I now see working. So I left my career in real estate with the support of my wife and family to start a movement, because if, for me, it would help one family stay together or one person not resort to violence, it would be a life worth lived. But because I'm still a bit competitive, I said, let's go for 1 million. So that was our goal. And after 9 years, we had trained 230,000 peacemakers, impacting over 8 million. We thought that was pretty good. In the planning of a summit in Rwanda last year, I was called by the director of development for the Kigali Genocide Memorial. And he said, Steve, next year is the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsis. If humanity could allow 1 million people to be killed in 100 days, could we not train 1 million peacemakers in their memory? I thought that was a great idea. It was in our name. It was in our goal. So I agreed. But now we would have to redesign the blueprint on how we achieved it, because we had trained 230,000 in 9 years. How are we going to train 1 million in 1 year? We would have to do it through partnerships and technology. So we created online learning modules that are available 24/7. We brought them to over 500,000 tablet computers of incarcerated young women, so that when they are out and looking for work, they would not be seen as felons, but as peacemakers. We are also able to bring it to over 2 million high school students across the United States. And then to take the technology that is out there of AI, we collaborated with a young student, a 21-year-old named Maddie at Stanford, to create a Nonflict AI tool that could be accessible 24/7 in every language. To test that out, in my last visit to Rwanda, after training youth groups from across the country, I went to a reconciliation village. This is where victims of genocide and the perpetrators live side by side. One of them, through a translator, said, "How can I live in peace next to my neighbor that killed my family?" So I took out the tool, and in Kenya, Rwanda, it took them through the Nonflict way. By the end of it, the victims and the perpetrators were all in tears, and they asked if they could print out the transcription for their village to all learn from. We learned through, now that we had 2.5 million, what's next, and we learned that there's research out there by Dr. Erica Chenoweth from Harvard that 3.5%, only 3.5% of a population working toward peace would be an unstoppable force for peace. Only 3.5%. If you calculate the population of the world, that's 250 million. So that became our new goal, to train 250 million youth as peacemakers. Why youth? Because you have more at stake on how we resolve conflict, for better or for worse. Because by definition, you're going to be here longer than us. You've now heard my peace journey. I used to think conflict was something to win. It took me too long to redesign my blueprint on how to deal with conflict at great cost. The gift of peace begins within, by understanding yourself and your partner, by understanding your shared reality and co-creating a better future, a better ideal reality. There will be roadblocks in order to achieve it. Too much of the world is trying to force us into tribalistic thinking, my tribe versus your tribe. What if we redefined what tribe is, not as people that look like us or vote like us, but as everyone in this world, every living being in this world, because we all impact each other. Imagine if we embrace conflict, not as something negative, but as an opportunity to grow. And we approach it with curiosity and maybe even nonflict. And what if that started with us? Thank you.